Hello again. Thank you very much for joining me here on Movie Ninja, and tonight is part 2 of the October watch list. These are all the movies that, provided that I had the time to dedicate an individual video to each one of these for why I'm recommending them, why I like them so much, I would. Unfortunately, I don't, so here's the watch list. And this is very similar to last time. This is from a broad range. This, as I was actually compiling this, is a little bit more, depending on who you are and what your views are. This is a little bit more nostalgic and classic, but it's still a wide range of different horror subgenres and horror sort of like tropes and things like that. So hopefully there's something for everyone. Okay, so. And once again, aside from the top three do have sort of like a special significance, either in the genre itself or just because, of their excellence. But the 10 and up, they could be watched in any particular fashion. Not saying that they're better or worse than anything else. Just listen them out there. So, number 10 is The Lost Boys, Richard Donner's classic from 1987. It's the 80s in a horror movie. Essentially a teenager, he's new to Santa Carla, and he gets in with the wrong crowd. Because they stay up all night, they're partying, these kids, and blood drinking. Not a good crowd. Wrong crowd. So, no, The Lost Boys is a vampire classic of the 1980s. It's a vampire classic in and of itself, and it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun to watch. So, number 9, once again, not in any particular order, not saying that's better or worse than anything, but Gojira, 1954. Retitled for the American version starring Raymond Burr, Godzilla. This is the original King of the Monsters, the Big Daddy kaiju feature that looked at the post-war horrors of the nuclear world that, the entire world had been opened up to at that point. The creature, the monster, Gojira, being the consequence of that. And people liked it so much that we still have Godzilla flicks even till today. But there is a lot of substance to it. In the future, sometime, not giving a definite date, but I would like to talk about this a bit more because it's more substantial than something to say that I really like it. I do, but I think it deserves a little bit more. So sometime, not committing to a date, in the future I would like to make a video about the original 1954 Gojira. And right on the heels of that, also from the Land of the Rising Sun, 1957's Throne of Blood, starring Toshiro Mifune. One of my favorite Shakespeare plays is Macbeth. Throne of Blood is a translation and an adaptation of Macbeth into feudal Japan. Please, if you have the opportunity, watch it. It is one of my favorites that I visit yearly, and I cannot highly recommend it enough. And if I talk any more about it, I'm just going to be repeating myself for about how much I love it. Now, number 7 from 1992, so it's a little bit newer than some of the other ones on this list, and that is Buffy the Vampire Slayer. As I mentioned in the last video, some of the, if you watch a lot of horror flicks, sometimes you can get in a very specific mood. Either you get anxious or you get just really low and sad because of all of the violence and all of the loss. So sometimes you need a little pick-me-up. And Buffy the Vampire Slayer from 1992 is that campy, schlocky fun. You have, when you watch it, which also, by the way, when you watch the film, it has 2 Oscar-winning actors in it. When you watch it, see if you can pick them out. I don't know if Donald Sutherland actually won an Oscar. There might be 3. I don't know. Maybe 4, actually. I'd have to do a little bit more like research on that. But nonetheless, it's about a cheerleader who finds out that she is the chosen one, and she is in a once-in-a-generation monster slayer specifically for vampires. And this was the film that launched the TV series that I have watched repeatedly over the years. But luckily the TV series, while still being like fun and humorous at times, this is pretty much just a comedy. In the very beginning of the film, it feels like it's meant to be far more serious than it actually is, with Rutger Hauer being like the main villain. But no, once you start seeing but Rutger Hauer's sidekick / henchman is Pee Wee Herman. It's Paul Rumens. You will not even recognize Paul Rumens as a vampire, but I mean, luckily he got those vampire teeth to chew the scenery because he needs it. Anyways, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, just a little bit of lightheartedness, a little bit of levity. It's very fun. So, number 7, Buffy the Vampire Slayer 92. Number 6, The Blob from 1988. This one, I would say, is actually a very strong contender. It's not as good. Not committing to that. Not saying that, but it's very similar in a number of ways to John Carpenter's The Thing. Now this came after, so anyways, so you saying you copied? No. John Carpenter's The Thing, I believe, came out 4 years prior to The Blob 1988. So I mean, it wouldn't work that way anyways. I'm saying for practical effects, it is actually very impressive, very startling. But yes, the practical effects are very advanced for the time, and the creature, the blob, the titular blob, is actually extremely voracious and predatory. I think if John Carpenter's The Thing was more like the Blob in this particular version, in the more modern version, I think it just would have won. Because it wouldn't have all that time for intrigue and skullduggery. It would just consume everyone as quickly as possible. But yes, so The Blob, 1988, add it to your creature feature watch list. And that, the first animated film for the watch list is Felidae from 1994. Felidae from 1994 follows the story of Francis, the house cat, who has just moved to a brand new house. And as he's exploring, he meets his buddy Bluebeard, a local tomcat, just in the neighborhood. Kind of a unsavory type, you might say, a little rough around the edges, definitely around the eye, for those that have either read the book or seen the film. And what do you know? There's a dead cat in his new backyard. So Francis, the house cat, must solve a grisly series of cat murders in his neighborhood. This is a film about a cat solving the murders of other cats. Not only is the premise unique, but it definitely belongs on a horror watch list because the imagery is very gruesome. It's one that I can't really recommend to everyone, especially because if you're a pet owner, or if you've ever had cats or anything or even just sympathetic to animal violence in general, this has numerous scenes that will be upsetting or triggering for you. It's not for the squeamish. It is not for scaredy cats. I'm sorry. Okay. Just stick with me, please. Okay, and I'll just go on with this whole spiel. But yes, Felidae is a very original and interesting sort of take on the sleuth mystery film, but from the direct point of view of cats. So, Felidae, 1994. By the way, you can find it online if you look for it. I believe it is available online. You just have to do a little digging. You have to but it is available in the original German, but I believe it is more regularly available in English. Once again, just look around someplace. I'm sure you'll find it. I've seen it several times over the years. Now, one of my favorite werewolf movies is coming up next at number 4, An American Werewolf in London, 1981. So two young college-age guys, they go backpacking through the United Kingdom and have one of the worst vacations ever. So, what happens? Okay, no. I suppose even though this is a film that it's been out for well over 30 years. Okay, I'm not going to give too much away. But, yes, unfortunately, someone gets turned into a werewolf. And as earlier referenced in one of my earlier reviews this month, this film really does stand out as a film about nightmarish transformation. So that's why it's, it's a little bit like higher. But wait a second, Movie Ninja, you says it's not in a ranking. Yes, it's not. However, still, it's a little bit up there. So, I mean, it is one of my favorites, and I do regularly enjoy it this time of year. Now, for the top 3. And these could be interchangeable, but still, they do have a certain measure excellence compared to some of the other entries. So, from 1968, Night of the Living Dead. There are these things called zombies that apparently we just can't get enough of. We have them in TV shows, we have them in movies, we have them in books, comic books, tabletop games. And like, maybe if George Romero hadn't picked up a camera and then just made this movie in 1968, public domain, by the way, you can find it almost anywhere. No, not public domain. I stand corrected. But still, it is easy to locate. Sorry. I just did a little mental, recheck on that. Still. But still, this is a film that changed pop culture forever. It is very well done. It's very well paced. It takes something of a similar structure to a disaster film, but translates what would either be a wildfire, a hurricane, a tornado, a plague movie. There is an explanation. It depends on the cut that you see, but there is. A lot of people say, well, there's a mystery. There's no reason given. There is an explanation. You just have to watch it, or maybe just watch it enough to actually pick it up off of the news broadcast, in the film. But there is an explanation given as to why the dead are coming back to life. But yes, 1968, Night of the Living Dead, one of the best. The progenitor of all zombie media. And yes, before anyone says it, I'm aware. I am keenly aware that zombie literature and other zombie media was somewhat available, but it proliferated on a quantum level almost after George Romero made this film. Night of the Living Dead, 1968. Please include it in your October watching. So, number 2, Sam Raimi's claim to fame, Evil Dead 1981. The film that pretty much gave us the cabin horror trope. Hey, what happens when a bunch of college somethings go to the woods? What happens when they find a book bound in human flesh written in ancient Sumerian, and just for kicks and giggles, they just open it up and it's okay, this, okay, let's say this and just see what happens, I mean, hey, we're just having a fun time, just out here with our girlfriends. What could possibly happen? The practical effects, the story is actually fairly simplistic. What happens when you're playing with fire? Except fire is unholy, unspeakable, occult magic. And I will say this. Something that took me back the most when I first saw this film, all the screams not from me, but on screen, all of the scream. There's so much screaming, and it becomes upsetting, like to a point. But that's why you have volume control. But yeah, just the premise, the atmosphere, the the practical effects, the violence, the gore. Yes, it is a sight to behold, and it launched several careers, actually. So, Sam Raimi's Evil Dead 1981. And number one, at the top of the list, a little film similar to Evil Dead. It's like similar themes of possession. You may have heard about it. It is 1973's The Exorcist, starring Max von Sydow, Linda Blair. It's like, I'm sorry, like I always think of her as like Reagan. I was about to say Reagan, and that's not her name. But still, Max von Sydow, Linda Blair, and others. I'm sorry. I mean, and just like, I know that they're established actors and actresses in this, but yeah, Will Friedkin's The Exorcist. It's not now nowadays. It doesn't really live up to the reputation of it's the scariest thing. It's the scariest film ever made. That was something that was prevalent to describe it when it first came out. That being said, I mean, films have gotten a lot scarier. The real world has gotten a lot scarier. So, I mean, just like, okay. So, watch it as a hallmark, a milestone, a grand achievement of the horror genre. Certainly. And I will give it credit for that all day, every day. But at the same time, like, you might not necessarily, like, oh no, like, you might not have that typical fear response that you have from maybe more visceral horror that has become more prevalent over the decades. All the same, though, it is extremely unsettling, and just, it gives you anxiety to see this poor woman and her daughter go through the process of, like, numerous medical investigation, finding no biological reason for her to exhibit the strange, unnatural behavior that she's showcasing. And then, as a last resort, hey, you know what? We've tried everything else. Let's ask a priest what he thinks. And so you have Father Karras, and Father Karras is like, well, I mean, let's be honest with ourselves. She might have a mental illness, Father Karras says to this poor mother. And, then, just some very, very unnatural, very upsetting scenes occur. And then he calls his buddy Max von Sydow. Is it like, okay, hey buddy, yeah, I'm not going to be able to handle this on my own. Can you be on the next flight in? Because we need to have this on lock. Okay. All right. Thanks. I appreciate it. Okay. And then they go to work. I would say the last third, because the first two acts are fairly the first two acts are a different film, pretty much. It's almost like a medical drama. And then the last third, because a lot of people think it's like, oh, it's all the possession and the exorcism stuff for the entire film. No, not really. It's the last portion that really makes it unnerving, unsettling, memorable, and just the fantastic storytelling feat that it is. So, but yes, 1973's The Exorcist. All right, guys. Now, this is part 2 of the watch list. Coming up next week, because this is the last week of October. So, but I will get the watch list out enough, with enough times. Like, I haven't heard of that movie. Maybe I'll take his word for it and I'll check it out. So, yeah. What do you guys think of the movies that were listed here? Are there any that you haven't heard of? Are there some favorites that you visit year after year? Let me know in the comments. Thank you guys very much for joining me here on Movie Ninja, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.